Hello there, world of tankers. Welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Droodles Blitz, and in today's video, I'll be doing a full-on professional masterclass for the Polish Tier 10 Tech Tree Tank Destroyer, the Blyskawica. This vehicle has been a roller coaster of emotions for me. When I first started playing it for like my first 50 games on the press account, I had over 4,000 average damage with an 80% win rate, and I thought to myself, wow, this is the most overpowered thing ever. And then I swapped over to my main account, and I'm not going nearly as good. The first, I would say, 50 games on my main account, I literally wanted to die. I tried 2 separate live streams playing in the vehicle. Neither of them went well. And yeah, so I've finally been able to start bringing my stats up on my main account. We're sitting at around 3,300 average damage, and it's continuing to rise. Yesterday alone, for about 60 games, I went 3,600 in the vehicle. So I'm not doing bad, but I can also say that the experiences that I've had in this vehicle, whether it's the update teams or I don't know what it is, they've definitely been rather interesting to say none the least. After playing this tank for so many battles, I can give you a full idea of whether or not this is the right tank for you, and, you know, whether this is a good tank at all. So let's start off very briefly talking about the armor and the strengths and weaknesses that the armor has. The biggest thing that I see people comparing to this tank is the 113 GFT, and honestly, I agree. I think the 113 GFT is a very close competitor to this tank. It's balanced very similar in terms of the armor, but I would say overall the 113G's armor is kind of just flat better. And let me explain why. On flat ground, the 113 actually is less armor. It's about 313 millimeters thick, and if we use heat, which is, you know, your baseline pen, it's about 340 millimeters thick against heat on flat ground. If we pull out the Blyskawica and we get heat shells again, like the Sheridan has, we put on enhanced, we can see that it's about 350. So both tanks are pretty similar, but it's a little bit more on the Blyskawica. But the big difference arrives to the angling capabilities. You see, you can drive the 113G, and you can angle it pretty hard, as you can see. And angling it like this allows that upper plate to now be 370, and it's still almost completely red. Where this tank, if you try to angle, well, that's the problem. The corner cutouts are incredibly weak on this tank, where they just don't exist, right? You can see the corner cutout, even at this angle, is 384, where, yeah, I mean, at this tank here, you just can't angle it at all. And by the way, this is only 350 millimeters of heat pen. If we were to pull out a T110 E5, which has more heat pen, I mean, the E5, even at this angle, that corner cutout's a pen. Where the 113G, this is 365. I mean, you can see the difference here. It's night and day. And that alone allows the 113 to get away with a lot more. But there's one other big advantage that this vehicle has, and that is the reverse speed. See, the 113 GFT reverses at 16 kilometers per hour. And we got some other competitors which also have high DPM. For example, the Object 263 is another really aggressive frontline TD. This tank reverses at 20. And same for the Object 268 version 4. That tank also reverses at 20. That reverse speed paired with the armor is what allows these vehicles to be super dangerous. Because with the 263, you can poke a corner really quickly, you can snap somebody for 460 damage, and then you can back up before they hopefully have the opportunity to hit you. That's where the Blyskawica falls apart. See, this vehicle has 2 major weak points. It has this incredibly weak corner, and then it also has a reverse speed of 12, making it the same reverse as the American Tier 10 Heavy, the T110E5. Now that is a serious problem, because you roll around a corner with terrible gun arc, mind you not, so you have to go really far around the corner to hit somebody, and then after you roll around the corner, you then have to reverse the tank back into cover. And the lower plate is incredibly weak, as you can see. So most of the time what ends up happening is you get nuked. You try to shoot somebody, then you back into cover, and by the time you've gotten back into cover, the enemy had time to shoot you. And it's all because of that reverse speed. And it's really been the biggest limiting factor on this tank, because I keep thinking to myself, the armor's better on this vehicle than the 113. It's better than the 263. It's better than the 268 version 4 hull down. And yet, every time I poke in this tank, I'm getting constantly ripped apart. And the simple answer is because you just can't back into cover fast enough. All those other vehicles have the reverse speed to get into cover before the enemy can actually aim in. This tank, the enemy has plenty of time to snap you. I can't tell you how many times I've made an aggressive play and I just can't get back into cover. and it really does suck. It's by far the biggest balancing factor on this vehicle. The gun, my loadout, I'm running calibrated shells. I've decided that Cali is still the best. The standard pen is APCR, which sucks, so you kind of need to run Cali. And then the premium as well, you also need to run Cali. It's a big difference. It's 19 millimeters of extra pen, so I do recommend it. Not only that, but the DPM is still fantastic on this vehicle when running Cali. Now, here's the interesting part. You obviously have 4,000 DPM at a very close distance, but realistically, you're sitting more at around 3,400 to 2,800 damage per minute. And the reason why is because you're not really shooting anybody at 50 meters of distance. You're going to be shooting people more realistically at around 100 to 200 meters, so your DPM is going to be sitting around, I'd say 3,000 on average. And at that point, it's really not that much of an advantage over something like the 113 GFT, which is sitting at around 2,800 DPM. So when you actually think about it, this vehicle is pretty well balanced. It can be incredibly overpowered. I have had more 8,000 and 7,000 damage battles in this tank than I have pulled out in any other vehicle in tier 10 in months. And it's because this tank just has so much damage per minute and so much alpha that when you're able to actually get those two things together, it really is scary. But when it comes to the effective capabilities of this vehicle, it is very challenging to actually get them to work sometimes. It's fairly fast on top speed, but it does have very poor power to weight ratio on medium terrain, as we can see. So because of that, it's actually not an incredible level of mobility. Its camouflage is alright actually, which is quite nice, but well, it doesn't really matter because it's a frontline tank destroyer. And then when it comes to the hit points, it's pretty average. I personally think this tank should have had a little bit more in terms of hit points. So we can see that while this tank does have some really good strengths, it also has some equally big downsides, which completely counter those strengths. So what I'm going to do now is we're actually going to take a look at some of the games that I've played in the Blyskawica, and you're going to see how I played this vehicle and, you know, exactly what it's good at and what it's not good at. As I said, I streamed this vehicle yesterday, and there were so many games when I streamed when I literally just got nuked. The problem with being a tank destroyer is that you don't have the hit points to really brawl a heavy, right? An E100 with enhanced armor has 2,750 health. That means an E100 has 800 more hit points than my vehicle. So if I shoot that E100, even at 50 meters of distance, and I take them down 700 health, they're still going to have 2,050 health. And if they shoot me for 660, I'm going to have like 1,300 health. The problem you can already see is that I have to then shoot that E100 again to bring them down to less than 2,000 health. And by that time, even if I do manage to kill the full health E100, I will still be crippled. I will have less than like 500 health left by the time I take that player out if they pen their shots. And that's where this vehicle does become really tricky, is when you're in that situation and these high alpha tanks are able to just outtrade you. Autoloaders as well, right? A VZ55, for example, can deal 920 damage or whatever in a matter of just 4 seconds. And at that point, even though I have incredibly high DPM, it doesn't really matter if the VZ can just shoot me twice and take half my health off. So you got to be really careful. It's a tank destroyer. I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter how strong your tank destroyer is. At the end of the day, it's still going to be incredibly hard to carry a game. You don't have the health, you don't have the mobility, and you don't have a turret to deal with everything thrown at you in a tank destroyer. And that's the exact same thing that this tank falls into. It's that issue where you don't have the ability to really hold a flank because you don't have a turret, you don't have the mobility to do so. But this game here is going to be a good example of when you see a free target, right? I see an enemy STB-1, and this is where the DPM on this vehicle is insane. I'm within 50 meters of this STB. My first shot alone does 750 damage into that player. And now I'm going to just chill here. I'm going to aim it on the STB again. Going to make sure I can pen the shot, and there you go. 2 shots, and we've taken 2,000 health off that player. I mean, that's insane when you think about it. And I'm already up to a pretty good amount of damage now. We got the enemy M46 Patton crossing in the middle, so I'm going to drive up here and try to get a shell into that player. Boom, there you go, 603 damage. It's driving to cover before the Foch is able to hit me. Up to 2,700 damage now dealt. That means one more pen, and we're up to 3,000. Unfortunately, the M46 Patton has gone in the cover. And as we can see, my team is doing pretty poor at this point. So we're going to aim it on the Patton. I'm going to get a 718 damage pen, and that puts me up to 3,477 damage. We get a bounce. We have an E50M who's going to try and rush the Patton. The problem is my reverse speed. I told you guys the reverse speed really kills this tank. I'm stuck here now. If I was in a Hori, a 268 version 4, something that reversed fast, I could have potentially backed off into the, this hull down spot back here. But because this tank reverse is so incredibly slow, there's just realistically nothing I can do. Now, I do take that player out of the game, but again, I just don't have the reverse speed to get out of here, so I'm completely pinned in this spot. Now, we have the enemy Rhino in front, so I'm going to aim it on that player. Nice 513 damage, up to 4,280 damage now. We have the Hori on my side, and, well, you can see exactly what I mean by tank destroyers just don't have that ability to really influence the game sometimes. I mean, I literally killed the STB, I cleared the Patton, and now I'm trying to shoot these players, but doesn't really matter now, does it? 4,888 damage dealt. I'm trying to stay away from the VZ, gonna angle my vehicle. VZ somehow misses me. Turn, boom. 684. And just like that, I did 5,572 damage. I mean, that's a crazy result in terms of damage when you think about it. But it doesn't matter. It's still a loss. And there's nothing I really could have done about it. You can see that the mobility on this tank, once you're kind of in that prone position, it's really tricky to get out of it. So, not a bad game by any means, everything was pretty good here, but it still really does show how quickly this vehicle can fall apart once your team starts falling apart too. So, what I've learned in this tank is that you really don't want to frontline in it. I think that's what a lot of the players are starting to learn that are driving this vehicle, is that on paper it looks like this is this incredibly aggressive frontline tank. And in reality, it's not. It's actually a tank that you want to drive pretty passive early game. Sure, you might have bad DPM the further you are away, right? At a distance greater than 200 meters, your damage per shot is 400. But you know what? Your DPM's still not the worst thing ever. It's 2,300 DPM at lowest DPM. And I know that's not good, but it's still the same as a Kron or an E100. And I would rather sit at that 400 damage per shot and still bleed out the enemy than go frontline and lose all of my health immediately and then have no effective damage output at the end of the game. So what I've started doing in this tank, as you can see, like this battle here, I play a very passive early game, and I wait for the enemy to make misplays. And then based off of those misplays, I'm able to reward myself. Now this game here, you're going to also see the terrible APCR standard pen, right? So I do load gold to pen the E100 turret. Nice 540 damage. We're going to reload. I'm doing alright so far. Let's see if I can get another shell into the E100. He's backing up. Not really worth it to take that risk, but that, dang, dude. I'm running refined gun as well, and we're fully aimed in with these shots. You can clearly see that this gun just is not wanting to work right now. So we're aiming on the lower plate of the 100. Dude, really? 299 millimeters of APCR standard can't cut through an E100 lower plate at that angle? It really is such a good showcase of how bad APCR is compared to the rest of the shells in the game. We do get a nice 520 pen into the 100 turret, though, dealing now 1,000 damage. Okay. We're going to reload again, and unfortunately I'm not able to deal any more damage. If those two shots I'd fired at the 100 had hit, that player would be less than 1,000 health right now. But it really does show how quickly this vehicle's gun can just screw you over. So you have 4,000 effective DPM, but then that player's less than 50 meters away from me, or greater, should I say. So then my DPM's 3,400, and then we miss half our shots. So my DPM was actually like, 1,700 there. It's such a good example of how DPM isn't everything. But it's why you play a little passive early game. You can see I've still done damage. I'm up to 2,000 at this point. And now that the enemy has been bled a bit, this is where I can actually play aggressive. I can get a 740 damage shot into the 57 heavy. He bounces me, and we're up to 2,900 already. So now we have the E100, we have an M48 Patton, and a T55A. Alright, well, I'm going to obviously help out my Foch here, and we're going to try and take this E100 out of the game. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to push wide. The E100 is somehow able to clear my Foch, which really sucks, but it's alright. I'm going to... Oh my god, dude! Aiming on the lower plate of the E100 and it bounces. You can even see in chat I said this gun. I was so sick of this gun trolling me over in this battle, right? I mean, we had bounced and missed so many easy shells. At this point, I'm just slinging premium shells into the Z100. But it's fine. We're going to get the pen. But because that one shell bounced Z100, now I get shot by him. So... Again, like, this tank is really strong, but sometimes the gun just really makes you irritated. So we're up to almost 4,000 damage. We're going to get a shell into the pattern. There you go. We clear him. 339. And that puts us over the 4,000 damage mark at this point. We only have one player left, which is the enemy T-55A. So we're going to move up. 55A cuts right through my lower plate. Only 2 shots we've received this game, and I'm already half health. It's just such a good showcase of how quickly you bleed health in tank destroyers. You know, it really is. Like, a 268 version 4 wouldn't run into this problem because the 268 version 4 is super heavily armored on the lower plate. But this tank, just fighting a T-55A and an E-100, I'm already down to 370 health. That would have made me a one-shot for every other player in the rest of the game. It is really interesting how quickly this thing can bleed health. But we did end up dealing 4,900 damage, blocking 1,500, getting 4 kills, and obviously finishing the top of the team. So the game that I really wanted to showcase here was a battle that I played on Desert Sands. This game was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And from the moment I fired the first shell, it was less than 2 minutes into the game. This battle is going to show you just how ridiculously overpowered the Blyskawica can be when you do get that Goldilocks position and you are given that farming potential. So we're going to move up here, right? Early game, I was thinking about sitting in this back spot, but I was like, nah, I'm going to move up. I want to be within 15 meters of the enemy, and this is the best map to really, you know, use this tank in. So we got a bunch of heavies, 4 heavies against us. That's like the perfect situation for this vehicle because the more heavies you have against you, the more damage you're able to deal. So we get a nice 625 shot into the Kron. And now I'm going to flex over to the enemy object 277. Gonna aim it on the side. There you go. Nice 580 damage. We're gonna reload again. 3, 2, 1, and alright. We get shot by the Yag for 800. That sucks, but it's fine. Get another shell into the enemy 777. We're up to 2,043 damage now, which is pretty good. Okay, let's reload. Boom. 749 into the Kron. Remember I was talking about autoloaders killing this tank? You can see here that reverse speed just does not allow me to get into cover. And at this point I was pissed at this Kron and decided just to push him. I know that I out-reload the Kron because I shot that guy before he was able to get that third shell. So I'm just going to reload here. I'm going to aim it on that Kron and yeah, bye-bye dude. Bye-bye. It's a good example of how this vehicle can rip out that damage. We're already up to 4,000. Think about that. We are up to 4,000 damage at this moment. Even if I die, I've already done my job. Now we're up to 4,900. The 60 TP tries to HE me, but ends up hitting my gun, which means that he doesn't deal any damage, and I still have 9 health left, and 9 health on this tank is scary. We deal an 875 max roll into that enemy 60 TP, putting me up to 5,700 damage. We have the enemy Blyskawica, who tries to kill me, but I'm able to just back up in time, and then slam a shell into the side of that vehicle's hull, bringing myself up to 6,522 damage at this point. Oh my god. Now we have the enemy AMX-50B who's going to show me a side. I'm going to load a high explosive for 850 damage, and unfortunately I do get cleared. But in this battle, as you can see, it has just hit 5 minutes on the dot now. In less than 2 minutes, I've been able to deal 7,369 damage. That is by far the most damage I have ever dealt in a 2-minute battle. By far. I have never done that much damage in my life in such a short amount of time. Not in a 263, not in a Badger, just this tank alone. I have had over 5 games now within the 7,000 to 8,000 damage mark, where rarely that ever happens, right? Usually that's something that's super, super lucky. But in this tank, you know, 1 out of 50 games or 1 out of 30 games, you get that battle where the enemy just sucks, you have a bunch of heavies to farm, and this gun works like crazy. So what exactly do I think about the NC-70 Blyskawica? Well, personally, I think it's an incredibly strong tank, but I also think it's heavily balanced on the mechanics that it features. The way that Wargaming balanced this tank was by giving it a terrible lower plate, awful corner cutouts paired with just the worst reverse speed. If that reverse speed was better, this tank would have been great. Just that Kron alone, if I'd been able to back into cover faster, it would have forced that Kron to drive around the cover sooner, and then it would have allowed me to reload quicker and potentially bleed out the Kron. But having that bad reverse speed really limits this tank on what it can do. So my recommendations to drive this tank properly: do not drive it aggressive. Play passive early game. Maybe not as far back as 200 plus meters, but stay passive enough that the enemy is not going to be able to bleed you. Because the problem is, again, you get hauled down in this thing, and then the enemy just doesn't care and overpokes and shoots your lower plate. And that's the problem, because you reverse so slow you can't get back into cover. So you have to put this tank in a position where that isn't going to happen. And if you can, you will do totally fine. But if you can't, then you're going to fall apart really quickly. It's definitely not an easy tank to drive. It has some overpowered moments, but it also has some very balanced moments. Overall, I would say this is a fantastic tank, though, and I would highly recommend to grind it, because I've been having an absolute blast playing in this thing. My average damage has been slowly going up, but the thing that people have to remember is that tank destroyers do not carry games. There are certain tank destroyers which are good at winning battles. For example, the Minnow is great, but the Minnow is not really a tank destroyer. It's a heavy tank, right? It's got armor on the turret, which is incredible. It has a 3-shell 490 alpha auto reloader and a turret which is pretty traversable. So the Minnow can really do anything that a heavy can. But the Blyskawica does not have the heavy tank capabilities. It doesn't have a turret, it doesn't have great mobility, and it especially does not have the flexibility to work aggressive frontline unless the enemy is bad. So you got to keep that in mind. You will not carry games in this vehicle like you will a E100 in the same situation. But you guys can let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.